Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. The proposed EU-Mercosur trade deal is facing mounting resistance from France and Poland as farmers protest its potential impact on agriculture and food safety standards. While the deal aims to boost trade by removing barriers with South American nations, critics argue that it threatens European competitiveness and sustainability. Joining us today to explore the stakes is Piotr Kaczyński, EU expert at the Geremek Foundation. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, nice to be back.
So let's start with the backdrop and giving a little bit of background on the provisions of the EU-Mercosur deal. What are some of the main provisions and why are the French and Polish so strongly opposing it?
Well, the problem out there is that this agreement, this particular agreement, has been negotiated for over 20 years. So it's like completely, at least two different eras now when the negotiations have started. It got stalled for many years and is back right now. The main reason of controversy is agricultural goods trade between Latin America and European Union. The fears that a lot of farmers have, it seems that they are quite unjustified. However, the fears are quite radical and big in France, in Poland, but not only, also in some other countries, are that there will be too much competition coming, especially in the beef sector and poultry, coming from South America, which would be competitive against Polish, French, or other European producers. And that's the fear, and that's the objection. However, the promise of the EU-Mercosur trade agreement is a major promise here. We are living in times where the European economy is rather slashing and stagnating. And a new major trade agreement with a major bloc, Mercosur, includes Brazil, Argentina, among other countries. Those are major markets, and that could boost some of the European export to that region. And that is so important also in terms of geopolitical shifts. We have Donald Trump in the White House as of January. We have China that has been pushing its boundaries also in Latin America. And for the EU to step into South America with a major trade agreement would be a major pushback against especially the Chinese in this regard. Therefore, taking all the pros and cons, there seems to be more pros than cons. And the Warsaw government seems to be discussing this matter today and taking an official position. We know that the junior coalition partner, the PSL, has been pushing against Mercosur agreement with the agriculture minister in particular, but those other geopolitical reasons, but also ungrounded reasons among farmers are very important. Why I'm saying that they are ungrounded refers to the fact that according to the draft agreement, the Commission will keep an eye, European Commission should keep an eye on the quality of imports so that the imported agricultural goods meet the sophisticated European standards. And if that is not if that's not the case, then those goods will not be imported into the European Union.
Right, like you mentioned, some of the farmers' concern is the fact that in order to, conduct their agricultural trade in Europe, there's a lot of red tape and regulation that has to be followed. Now, their main concern, or purportedly, is the fact that these South American goods coming into the European Union sometimes do not have to adhere to this standard, which would give them a competitive edge over the Polish or French farmers. And you've been saying that this kind of fear seems quite unjustified. So can you help us explain why you think that this might not actually be as significant of a hit to the local farmers' competitiveness as they thought it might be?
There are two major elements here that have not been widely explained to the wider public. One is the fact that the goods that are going to be imported will have to meet the European sophisticated standards, and the European Commission is going to keep a very close eye on that. This is not the case of Ukrainian agricultural goods imports into the EU. It more looks like the Canadian free trade agreement that we have had over a couple of years, and there were some fears about a decade ago against the Canadian imports, and we see that the Canadian producers have major problems meeting those sophisticated European standards, and the imports from Canada have not been important, and they were not competing against, for example, EU beef producers. And the real threat for the farmers is not the standards, but exactly the way the farms are operating in Brazil or Argentina, where they are those massive farms out there, and here we have much smaller farms, more family farms, and therefore the economy of scale in South America is much greater. So this is the fear. But then if we compare Canada and South America, this is quite comparable. Therefore, we could be quite secured that our standards will hold and will protect our producers. That's point one, number one. And point number two is quotas. Once the agreement is in force, there will be quotas, and they are quite small quotas for this especially contagious goods such as beef, poultry, sugar, and a few others. So there is a little risk, but that risk is not that much. It will not endanger the survival of European farmers.
Right. Do you think that this sets a precedence for more protectionism? When we take a look at the situation in the States, Trump seems to want to put more sanction on goods going in, well, tariffs at least, and we're also seeing these protests when it comes to foreign goods. Do you think that we are going down a road of more kind of protectionism when it comes to trade, or eventually the global free market will eventually prevail?
This is a very interesting game, but important to see what is left of this process of liberalizing trade. Over the couple of decades, this was the mantra that we need to remove the trade barriers. And right now, this kind of protectionism that is coming in to protect ourselves against the world outside is sometimes can be good and beneficial, but sometimes can be contradictory, because we have to also remember that liberalization with higher standards should mean lower prices of goods on the tables of consumers and better quality products at the end of the day, and also exporting European standards to this massive region. So if we talk about geopolitics and geoeconomy, this is a major positive move for Europeans to increase the European, let's say, impact on the world and gain an important partner. We all saw what happened when Olaf Scholz visited President Lula in Brazil a couple of years ago. He was slammed into his face when Scholz was asking Lula for support for Ukraine. Why he was slammed into his face? Because Brazil is so detached from European economic and political environment, and instead is focusing on China and Russia and India. And this is exactly what Europeans and European diplomats and European economies need to invest in to take this gigantic country and its neighbors out of this potential threatening paradigm into more democratic camp, into our democratic camp.
Do you think the fact that, well, we have to be looking down this global trade and the benefits that it brings, the European Union will have to rethink some of its more protectionist strategy even within the Union? We see France being one of the dissenting voices right now when it comes to this trade deal, which is a country they're traditionally known for destroying millions of liters of wine every year just to keep the price at a certain level. Now, with the global trade and more goods from foreign countries flooding in, this will again come back to to impact these prices. So how do you reconcile the kind of EU standards of keeping up certain costs with the need for global trade?
Absolutely. I mean, there is a risk. I did not mention wine because there's no wine producers in Poland that are significant for the market. But wine is a major issue here as well for France, for Italy, for Spain, and some other nations. The issues, however, applicable to wine are the same as to beef and poultry and sugar producers. So the risks are there. But then if you look at what happened with a very similar agreement that we have had with Canada about 10 years ago, this has not materialized. So one has to quantify those risks. Now, when it comes to the French government, it's extremely weak government. We know that Barnier government is effectively on the brink of collapse next month. So this is what they are trying to get to hold on to get a support from which is effectively. It's going down. It's going down the drain because it's not trying to win anything from positively, but just trying to not to lose, and that's just not the way it works in today's world.
Right, perhaps a more kind of populist approach in domestic policies. Well, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.